السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ازيكم جميعا؟ أخيرا انتهيت من ترجمة الجزء الأول من هذا اللقاء اللي هيكون مقسم إلى 3 أجزاء، وأعتذر عن التأخير. إذا من الواضح أن مقدمة اللقاء اتضح أنها من أشد المعجبين بأندرو، وده كان واضح جدا أثناء اللقاء، وتقريبا توافقه وتدعمه في كل ما يقول. هذا ما سوف تكتشفوه خلال المشاهدة. إذا أولا، لو مش مشترك في القناة اشترك وفعل الجرس عشان يجيلك إشعار بباقي اللقاء، والأهم إنك تدوس لايك عشان انتشار الفيديو، وأيضا دعما لي والقناة وعلى المجهود المقدم في الفيديو.
All right, let's just jump right into this. Andrew Tate.
Long time.
I know, it's been a very long time.
Very long time.
Actually, I met you downstairs at the Ritz.
Correct.
George and I were engaged at the time.
Yep.
And I probably was very swept up in George and barely got time to talk to you, but I do remember you being very polite. So it's interesting to fast forward to today, and you were very much in the UK circuit.
Yeah.
Now it seems like your celebrity is kind of really hitting the US market. They're kind of finding you for the first time, digging up a bunch of old clips, and there's a lot of pressure now on conservatives to say something really awful about you.
There seems to be a pressure on everybody on all sides to say something awful about me. I kind of feel like I've been placed in a position where there's always someone attacking me new each day. But I guess I was built for it because it doesn't bother me like it should, perhaps.
You seem to be doing pretty well given the circumstances.
I know the truth in my heart, and I know that what I say is the truth, and I understand very well the internet and how it works. And I also think I'm perspicacious enough to understand there's certainly a degree of weaponized virtue and perhaps a degree of jealousy and perhaps a few other things that are involved in all of these attacks. I don't believe that people who sit and attack somebody for their past, especially something from so long ago, are genuinely virtuous. I don't think it's about virtue. I think it's about, well, I can get some clicks this way, or I can get some views that way, or he did the biggest interview ever, or whatever it is. There's certainly some other motivations. And I don't want to say water off a duck's back. I don't want to come across as arrogant. However, I do believe that since the dawn of human time, every single king with any kind of empire was constantly at war. And I think if you're going to become one of the most famous people on the internet, you're going to be at war. And you'd be a fool to become massively influential and then cry about the fact that you end up in constant battles. It doesn't matter if you're Napoleon or Charlemagne or Genghis Khan. There's always someone prodding the edges of your empire, trying to find weakness, see what a little bit of land they can take. And I think it's always been the same. And right now, I guess you could say, to a degree, I certainly have an empire and I'm massively influential. And there's a degree of, I wouldn't say jealousy, but there's certainly some ambitious people who are trying to damage it. I think that's what it is.
So I did see a mashup clip that we're not going to show because I thought it was unfair. I will say that. Yeah. Only because there was no context provided to the clips. It was just an extract of something that you said that 10 years ago. Some of them were literally 10 years ago. Yep. Didn't know what year it was from, didn't know who you were talking to, didn't know what context it was. And I've been victimized online by something like that before, where somebody takes something abstract and says, well, this is what must be what she means, until they're provided the full context of the clip. Yep. And I also take exception to, I think, digging back 10 years. I don't know who could survive that litmus test. I'm 34 years old today. Yeah. 10 years ago, today I speak to my audience. I talk about, they call me puritanical. I talk about, not drinking. Yeah. I think the biggest change has been becoming a mother. Yeah. And it would really be unfair if we went and found Candice at 24 years old, liberal, dancing at One Oak, and said, well, look at these clips of Candice Owens. Fortunately, I had no cameras in my face 10 years ago. Yeah. You somehow did. So I think it's a bit unfair. I also think that some of the critique that is coming your way is coming from people who are well-intentioned, like they actually don't perceive, maybe perhaps, okay, this is 10 years ago, what the context is, has he changed since? So I will ask the question, and we are going to get into some of those clips. You said you're an open book. Yeah. How have you transformed? And I've seen changes just, I think, in the last 5 years. Yep. Who are you today? How have you transformed?
That's a very good question. It's also very important when you talk about Candice from 10 years ago. The idea that you did something 10 years ago, which you would no longer agree with, is one thing. But the second thing, to come along to the conclusion that you now have no value to add to the world would be massively unfair. Right? Everybody changes, and that's fine. I'm not the kind of person who's going to sit and apologize for his past. I believe all's well that ends well. I believe we're humans and we grow and we learn. I'd be a fool and I'd be disingenuous to sit here and pretend I was sorry for something I did in the past. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be very honest to everyone at home. I've talked at length for a very long time about my history and the fact I used to run a webcam business, and I don't feel guilty for that. I know that's maybe what they want from me. I don't feel sorry for that. I've never hurt anybody. It has nothing to do with my current criminal case. Everybody who worked for me was very positive. In fact, my number one supporter is currently online, and my best lifelong friends and some of the letters I got in jail were from people who worked for me at that time. And I had a business, and I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend that I feel guilty or I feel sorry for that. I'm from a low income background. I did what I had to do to survive. And truthfully, all in all, being very honest, I don't think what I did was really that bad. And I want to say that. And I know people are going to lose their minds for it, but I didn't sell drugs. I didn't kill anybody. I mean, what did I do? I found a gap in the market and I helped some people organize some accounts on an internet website. That's what I did. And they're going to try and criticize me and crucify me for the next 100 years because of it, because of clips that were made 10 years ago. I think it's disingenuous. And I don't think anyone actually really cares about the virtue of it, because nobody who was involved in my life back then is complaining about anything. I think it's just an attack on me. And certainly we learn and we grow and we change. But it's very interesting how hypocritical the idea of looking at somebody's life over such a long period actually is. I mean, we can look at Donald Trump, right? Who I'm a fan of. I guess I know you've had your ups and downs with him, but in the conservative sphere, he's pretty well respected. Donald Trump used to own the Miss Universe pageant. Are we going to criticize him? Are we going to crucify him? What about the girls he had in Miss Universe who decided to go on and do Playboy magazine? Is he a bad person now? Why? Now, that's not Christian values, right? People are messy and life is messy. And nothing is completely clean. And this idea that you're going to find somebody and 10 or 11 years ago, they did something which might even be slightly distasteful, not even illegal, and you're going to crucify him forever. I just don't believe that's genuine virtue. I think it's just an attack.
I do think what's happening right now is they are wrongly conflating you having run a webcam business, however long it was ago, to the criminal cases happening in Romania. And this is why I interjected in my voice when people were saying, he's not a conservative, he's not a Christian. I don't understand why Christians are giving him a platform.
And I'm very sorry to interrupt. I'm very sorry to interrupt you. But yeah, I will say right now, I would never consider myself a conservative from that standpoint.
Right.
I'm a rational actor. I'm a reasonable person. I'm intelligent. I use my brain. And I guess that makes me align with many conservative issues overall, because the other side have lost their minds. I don't wake up and stand there as a conservative figure. I don't consider myself a conservative figure. I've just ended up aligning with them on a lot of core issues because I'm a forward-thinking, rational person. But I'm certainly not I don't stand up and say, hey, I'm a conservative. I'm not interested in whether the conservative want to embrace me from that perspective or not. I have no interest in that. I wasn't even particularly political until my recent debacle, where I realized a lot of things about the world and how avoiding politics will not save you, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one of the things I pointed out. I said, he's never said he was conservative. He is not identifying as a Christian. So why are we suddenly using that as whether or not a Christian, a conservative can put him on a platform and talk about something that is relevant? And something that is relevant is whether or not you are being wrongly or unfairly persecuted by a government.
Yeah.
I have spoken on my platform after examining the charges against Harvey Weinstein. He's clearly not a conservative. He's about as far left as it really gets.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I don't have an interest in whether or not he's guilty or not guilty, and whether or not he was persecuted because of a overtly political movement like Me Too. So I do not like that these things are being conflated, but I want to park that aside because we are going to get into your case and just stick with what you just said about the webcam business. So you say you don't have any guilt for it.
I'm not sorry. I don't operate in that frame. I don't think it's an intelligent way for a man to go through life to say, I'm sorry. At a younger age, I did the best I could possibly do, and I did the best I believed at the time. And you grow from it and you learn. And perhaps there's times in your life where you look back and think, well, maybe I would have done this differently, because hindsight's always 20/20. But every rapper sold drugs. Like, you get to a certain stage in your career where you no longer sell drugs and you don't do it anymore, but that's part of the life journey, and life's messy. And I'm not going to sit here and apologize to any conservative who wants to sit me down and try and give me some moral high ground garbage. I'm not going to listen to it. I had a very rough upbringing, a very tough life, and it could have been so much worse in so many ways. I've done nothing illegal. I've never hurt anybody. Everybody who was involved in my life back then are massive supporters of me. And I think it's very hypocritical for someone to look at a situation they were not involved in and don't understand, look at old clips taken out of context, and then tell me and a whole bunch of people who were in my life who were all perfectly happy that something bad happened or something wrong happened. I don't think that's genuine. And for that reason, I'm not going to sit and be preached to by these people who are imperfect themselves. Everybody's imperfect. And another thing that's really important, we talk about Christian values. I also think that I find it very interesting and ironic that I'm somehow the problem, and these Christians feel like they need to come and attack me now in the name of Christian values. I think Christianity has much bigger problems than Andrew Tate and some old clips. I think they have much bigger problems that are happening in their churches on a daily. I think you can go to a Christian church in a lot of America and be very disappointed in what you've seen. I don't think I'm the problem with Christianity. And yeah, it's very interesting. But there was a webcam company, and I've talked about it at length on many different podcasts. I had a business. Many girls on there were perfectly fully clothed and would paint pictures or sing and dance and laugh. I've talked about this at length. I've had nothing to do with it for 10 or 11 years, and nobody was ever hurt. And I am not sorry for it. I don't see why I should be.
Okay. So the way that I read you, and you can definitely let me know if I'm wrong, obviously, because you are you, is that people that don't come from a lot, me and you, obviously have different decisions that lay before us in life than people that come from everything, or people that come from a very stable household, two loving parents. And this kind of gets into the dilemma. I remember years ago, Tommy Lahren had said something, she's a political commentator in the US, had said something to the effect of, well, Jay-Z used to sell crack. And he sort of laughed.
And he probably did.
And he did. And he sort of laughed this off. And I remember looking at that because I looked up to Jay-Z's music so much, and I looked up to him because it made it possible for me to change my circumstances. So you're looking at this guy who comes from nothing. He came from the projects. He sold drugs, and then he doesn't have to sell drugs anymore. And he's now talking about ideas and talking about business. So I was able to more closely understand and go, okay, I can actually climb out of these circumstances, even though I wasn't born, with a ton of wealth and a lot of opportunities that some people were. And I think it's very difficult for people that don't come from nothing to understand that, and they're so sure that if they were in desperate circumstances that they would still never do anything.
But this is their massive mistake, and you're right, but this is their massive mistake. The reason I have such huge affinity with the youth of the world today, especially the masculine youth, is one, because a lot of them are disenfranchised, which is one conversation, but two, also the reason my reach is so global, the reason I have so many fans in Slovenia and Southside Chicago, and I've had kids from Ulaanbaatar come up to me, Mongolia, all around the world, is because I speak to the disenfranchised, and part of that is always going to be, or is going to involve, financially disenfranchised. I'm someone who comes from absolutely nothing and made himself into something. And unfortunately, there's a rocky road sometimes, like you just described with Jay-Z, to get that done. But if I would have been born into a perfect family, like you said, two loving parents, family was rich, white picket fence, and I was saying all the same things, then they wouldn't have the same affinity. So if you look at even a lot of superheroes, you look at Batman, he's a flawed person. And I think the reason I'm seen as a hero and the reason I have the fan base I have is because to a degree, I've always been a flawed person, and I'm not a perfect human, and I don't want to be. And I think that actually adds a lot of credibility to my character as a whole, that I've become the kind of person who believes he can add value to the world. And just like you said with Jay-Z, he changed. And the biggest thing for me personally, though, truthfully, and I want the whole world to understand this, I've been forensically analyzed by multiple different federal agencies from different countries for the last 17 months, analyzing every aspect of my entire life across the last 10 to 15 years. And what did they find? An old YouTube clip? That's the worst they could find. No sexual perversion, no drugs, no genuine criminal acts. They found something semi-immoral in a YouTube clip. And I would actually challenge anybody who wants to throw stones at me to go through the same level of scrutiny I have been under. And let's see what they find in your life. Because I guarantee anyone who's watching this right now, you sit there, you have a secret in your closet. You have a skeleton that you don't want anyone to know about, and they would have found it. So what's the worst thing that they found about me, considering I've been the most attacked man in the world for 17 months? An out-of-date YouTube clip? An out-of-context YouTube clip? Is that the worst? I think it's crazy that people aren't even sitting there and going, okay, this guy's been absolutely attacked and from every single angle, and this is the worst they could possibly drag up.
Right. No, I agree with you. So the question I would ask you, though, because obviously you've moved away from that business, the thing I find to be the most interesting about you is that younger boys love you.
Yes.
They absolutely, like the 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old. I have not come across a 12, 13-year-old boy who's not just an Andrew Tate stan.
Yeah.
And I think it's remarkable. It gives you a lot of power. And I think this is perhaps the interest that a lot of people have in you is, what are you going to do with this power, right? You have all of these boys, they believe in you, they stand up for you. And that is why it becomes important to state, I'm not sorry that I lived this. I don't think I would say that I'm sorry for anything decisions that I made when I was young either, because this is the deck of hands that I was given. What do you want me to do? Yeah. But at the same time, I do try to, now knowing that I have such a following of a lot of young ladies that follow me, say like, listen, I did the idiot stuff, so you don't have to.
Power and responsibility go hand in hand. And that's the thing that's so interesting, these out-of-date clips, and they want to talk about these things from 10 years ago. At the time when I was talking to camera, those videos are made for private circulation initially. Secondly, I wasn't trying to educate the world on anything back then. I didn't have the kind of power and influence I have back then. The way you say something to a video which has 50 viewers has to be different than the way you say something to a video that has 50 million viewers. Mm-hmm. Power and responsibility absolutely go together, and I understand that very well, and I understand the power I have. And I do believe I'm now an absolute force for good in the world, and I'm far more careful with how I'll project myself with certain ideas. Absolutely agree, completely. But that's the thing that's even so crazy about all of it. These old videos that everyone's so concerned about wouldn't even circulate if my haters weren't constantly trying to use them against me. They'd be disappeared into the history of the internet. I don't know where these things come from. I don't know where they were found. I don't know where they are. It's kind of crazy. A lot of people are making all these constant attacks on me, and I don't watch a lot of it. I'll have to be honest with you, Candice. I don't watch all of it. But a lot of the videos are so outdated. The only reason they even exist now is because my haters are so desperate trying to take me down. They don't have any concern for them being seen because they wouldn't be circulating them otherwise. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. Power and responsibility go hand in hand. And I do believe that I now have a huge platform, and with young boys, they're exceptionally interested in my case. I do believe to a degree I'm an anti-hero. I do believe to a degree that the harder I'm attacked, the more credibility is given to me in the eyes of my fans. I think that they see, everyone's out to get this guy. Everyone was out to get Batman. This kind of feels that way. And I do try and lead everyone down a good path and say extremely positive things. And I don't think anybody is finding any clips from the last 5 to 6 years which have anything negative in them.
Right. I think you've changed. That's why I said over the last 5 years, I think there's been a seismic shift. And speaking to boys, like younger boys, I think one of the things that they're really suffering from, I get tons of responses rather unexpectedly whenever I talk about the topic of pornography on my show. And it's one of those things that, again, if you found Candice 10 years ago and you asked me about pornography, and by the way, this was actually implanted into my head from a health school, like from health education, where they would say pornography is healthy, people should watch pornography, people should engage in pornography, it's okay if you're in a relationship for you to watch pornography. And then I had a huge wake-up call when I spoke to Tim Ballard, he runs Operation Underground, and then I realized how closely pornography is related to human sex trafficking.
Real sex trafficking, not TikTok
sex trafficking. And yeah, we should talk about that because they are kind of stretching the definition of sex trafficking. In your case, I've taken a look at it. And what's remarkable to me is the amount of young men, and I would say from the ages of 18 to 35, that write in and say how much they're struggling with porn, how much they're struggling with pornography addiction, how they feel that no person is talking about the ills of pornography. Yeah. And so I just watched this clip of you this morning, sitting next to Adam, 22.
You were ever interested in doing your first ever double penetration scene that me and Lena, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like,
dude,
would he be a suitable candidate? Can I tap him in?
I don't know. No. He looks built.
Can I fill in real quick, Andrew?
You're out, Aiden. We canceled you. You're not in this conversation anymore.
Fair enough. Go ahead, Andrew. Would you double penetrate her, bro? Would you do that, Andrew? Go ahead. Finish the answer question.
All popped together. Is that chill?
There's absolutely 0% chance of that happening. And it's not because Lena is particularly unattractive. It's because she's married to Adam, and I have no interest in degenerate, pointless sex, and I have no interest in making a spectacle of myself or even just involving myself in anything which I deem to be overall haram and pointless. That's just not something I'd be interested in. There's not a single amount of money on the planet you could pay me to undertake. So
you were very polite. I'm not going to be so polite. I thought he was an absolute degenerate. And I mean that the idea of having a woman making the vows that you make in marriage and literally offering her body as he did to you was a form of degeneracy. And you were being very nice and measured. And I think that for that moment, that was the best thing that you possibly could have done because she looked quite vulnerable. Yeah. Lena, I think is her name. Yeah. But how do you reconcile that now, right? You're in a circumstance like this. You're being polite. You did say, I'm uncomfortable. You did say that I would never do this. And I think that was really important for you to say. But you're not the same person. I mean, how did you?
Yeah.
Even reflecting on it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so disgusting. He offered you his wife.
It is pretty disgusting. And it's also pretty misogynistic because he didn't ask her. He
No.
offered her. I felt sorry for her. So I was very measured with my conversation with them because I felt sorry for her. I could tell she was nervous. She was swinging on the chair back and forth. She didn't want to be there. She felt extremely nervous. And I think that only a coward would berate a very nervous, very scared woman, even if she did something which I personally disagree with, even if I think Adam is personally, he doesn't align with my morals, because she was so nervous and because she was so almost afraid she looked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she expected me to go at her hard. So I just felt sorry doing it. I just didn't, I couldn't find, maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I think she knows what I think, and I think she knows what the world thinks. And I think if I go at her too hard, it's just going to break her. And I don't really like the idea of her, turning off the camera and bawling her eyes out. I think that God will teach her the lessons she needs to learn from her experience, both positive and negative. And I think that's God's job to do and not necessarily mine. But yeah, it was certainly uncomfortable, and it shows how degenerate the world is becoming. And pornography as a whole is simply just, I think it's an effect. I think it's a tool which is used to ensure that the male populace stays as docile as possible.
Mm.
I don't think that any of the things that are happening to the male population are accidental. I think that keeping us as docile as possible is very interesting for the people who are in charge of the world, because we're the warrior class. At the end of the day, it's going to boil down to the men who are going to stand up and actually do something about anything at some point in time. So I think they like the idea of us being docile. And I mean, how much more docile can you get than a man sitting there looking at a screen, not even want to reproduce for real because he's just staring at a screen? And I think that's just a next stage in the slave mind.
And it's everywhere now. Whereas, and this is something that my husband says, he doesn't have any social media because he's like, Instagram is pornography. I open my Instagram and I've got Emily Ratajkowski's butt cheeks.
Yeah.
And I'm not a man, so I don't have that same biological reaction to seeing it. But I can only imagine how difficult it is for a man when you open an app and you've got Kim Kardashian offering her body to Emily Ratajkowski. Even if you're walking down the street, I've realized even how desensitized I've become to pornography, because you see an ad for Gucci and for whatever reason, she's got to be completely naked while she's holding the bag.
I remember in my lifetime, there were music videos that got censored or banned or can only be played after 10 or 11 at night. And if you watch them now, you'd be like, what? For what? What is that? A bikini? Like, it's nothing. It's amazing how quickly it has degenerated. And yeah, absolutely.
And we're all degenerating with it. Like I've realized the fact that I don't have a reaction to seeing the half-naked woman holding a Gucci bag means that I have been desensitized to pornography. And I can only imagine what that does to men.
Oh, completely. And but this is what the powers that be want. They want to make sure that the male populace is as docile as possible. And they do that with a large array of weapons. And they do that with a web of tools. And I believe that I'm the counter to that, which is the reason I ended up attacked in the first place. But unfortunately, when you buy into the slave mind programming, you not become the kind of man who can easily attract a woman, because you're not attractive to females as a whole. So how do you satisfy yourself? You end up sitting there staring at a screen, and they convince you that's a good life to live as a man, and that's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And you don't even get to genetically reproduce. I do also, though, and I want to make this clear, I do believe in absolute and utter self-accountability as a man. I think as a man, everything that happens to you is your fault. Me going to jail was my fault. Me being attacked online was my fault. If all these bad things that happened to me, I will take responsibility for, even if I believe they were unfair or unjust. And I think that any man who's going to sit there and say, I'm struggling, he also needs to wake up and understand that if you're going to truly struggle to not click on a website, then you're going to deserve the terrible life you're going to live. And the devil or the matrix, or whoever you want to call them, are going to fill your life with temptations. They're going to fill your life with easy way outs that they're going to want you to take, because the good road is usually the hardest road. And if you're going to continue to fall for them, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences of that. So it's double-edged. It's certainly difficult that pornography is everywhere and men are struggling with it. But to me, what's even more upsetting is that these men don't have enough fortitude and enough mental strength to wake up and say, I'm better than that. Okay. But this is the thing, right? So I'm about to get started, Candice.
Good, get started.
This is the thing. But this is the thing, right? So when you attack a man's mental fortitude on one issue, you attack it on all issues. This is why it's done purposefully. To resist a slave mind, you need to be able to resist in the first place. How can you resist a slave mind if you have no physicality, you have no willpower, no ability to mentally resist anything? Well, then what you're going to end up doing, you're going to end up eating the bugs and watching the porn and sitting in front of your computer. And that's what they want from the people. So I think that it's actually all very interconnected. people come at me with the porn problem, and I get the same thing. Guys say to me all the time, hey, what are you going to do? What should I do? I struggle with pornography. And I say, that's because you have nothing else in your life in order. If you were in good physical condition and you had the money you were supposed to have and you had the mentality you were supposed to have, you wouldn't need it. So the reason you're so addicted to porn is because everything else in your life is a failure. And yeah, it's certainly a complicated issue. It's a difficult one. And this is why they fear male agency so much, because when men truly wake up and decide to be the best versions of themselves, they're hard to control because all these control mechanisms fall by the wayside. They don't want the porn anymore. They don't want the antidepressants anymore. They don't want the garbage anymore. And now you have a whole bunch of men who actually want truth and honor and respect, and they want to live for something. And then what are they going to live for? They're going to want to be brave. They're going to want to do the right thing, regardless of how dangerous it may be for their own personal circumstance. And that sounds like a difficult population to enslave. And that's what's scary.
So how do you reconcile, first off, how long ago was your webcam business?
Yeah, so I stopped having any involvement with it. I think 8 to 9 years ago, I stopped. It was a long time ago. It was at the early stages of the internet. And I'll explain it one more time for people. I've explained it already at length, but I'll explain it from the beginning. I had a company. I was fighting at the time. And on a side note, I actually want to make this clear. We talk about things people have done in the past for money. I beat people up for money. I hurt people for money. I don't often tell people this, and I think it's the first interview I've mentioned it in. There's a person who can never walk the same again because he fought me. I've had 87 professional fights, and I did my best to kill people. You're going to sit here and talk about what I did for money. I literally hurt people for money. And so I'm not a perfect person. I'm not sorry for my kickboxing career or my cage fights. I'm not sorry for any of it. I had bare knuckle fights. I'm not sorry for any of them, right? I was a person who had to pay the bills. I lived the life I lived. I used the tools I had. And I ended up opening a webcam company where girls would sit on a laptop and they would talk to guys on the internet for money. That's what they would do. The girls would sit there fully clothed or a bikini. Some of them would paint pictures. Some of them would sing songs. It's very similar to Twitch is now. Twitch is almost more sexual than the sexual websites were back then. I helped the girls set up accounts. We worked together. I helped them become as popular as possible. And everybody made money and everybody was happy. And nobody is complaining about it. Nobody's upset about it. None of the girls who worked for me are upset about it. The government aren't after me for it. It's perfectly legal. Nothing's wrong with it. There's just a whole bunch of people who now think that they can take the moral high ground against me because I previously ran this company. And I think I can anticipate the question you're going to ask. How do I reconcile with the fact that I used to produce pornography or degree pornographic content?
Now men are writing to you like, how do I?
And now men are trying to escape it.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. There's a few different ways I can answer that question. I think the first way I'll answer it is if you own a liquor store and an alcoholic comes in and you refuse to sell him alcohol, does he stop being an alcoholic?
No.
He just goes and buys from someone else. So that's the cop-out answer. The cop-out is, well, these people who are addicted are always going to be addicted regardless of whether I did it or not. So that's the cop-out answer. But the second answer I can give, which I think is more detailed and probably more nuanced, is one, I intimately understand the relationship between men and these websites. I've had and seen men give away their life savings to girls they've never met. I've watched and I've seen it. And I actually think a lot of the insights I give, a lot of the things I tell the world about the mental health crisis, about men being so constantly lonely, about how important it is to build yourself into a high value man, about how money alone is not enough. I explain all these things. A lot of these are lessons from the webcam days. I saw dudes who had a whole bunch of money, no other attributes, and they ended up on these websites spending hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't have anything else. So I think I learned a lot of important life lessons, and I do my best to try and pass them on to people. But I guess also, and this is the final answer I want to give about this whole subject, is that I do think I can take the question you're asking and reverse engineer it and use it against the people who are trying to attack me for it. My answer to it would be, how do you sit and want to criticize me for being involved in the production of pornography 10 or 11 years ago if you're involved in the consumption of it? Because you're creating a market for it. So anybody who wants to sit and say that I did things wrong, that's fine. You're allowed to throw stones. But if you're in a glass house, if you have ever signed up to an OnlyFans account, if you have Instagram, if you're following these models on Instagram who you don't know, who are showing their tits and ass all day, if you've watched porn, if you fancy or think some beautiful woman on a movie, if you're going to live in lust yourself and you're funding this entire industry, you're downstream, you're at the bottom of it, how can you then take the moral high ground on the person who's producing it? That doesn't make sense to me. So if you've totally abstained from pornography your entire life and you've never looked at it ever, and you've never been involved with it ever, and you're a perfect person and you want to come along and say what I did was wrong, that's fine. But I don't think most people who are complaining can even say that. I don't think they can. And I will once again state this, and I state this as a matter of almost fact. the level of investigation I've gone under, the level of forensic investigation my life has been submitted to, most people don't understand. Most people have never been through what I've been through. They've not had their entire life forensically analyzed, every word they've ever said, everyone they've ever spoken to, every WhatsApp chat, everything, head to toe by federal agencies for the last 10 years. And the most they come up with is that I ran a webcam company, which I've already admitted to. That's it. Take these people who criticize me and see how many porn websites they've been on. Get their laptops, see the they've Googled, see who they've spoken to. Like, it's all massively hypocritical. I do understand that some people would hear that and go, oh, you know, he's a bad person, etc. I don't think I was a bad person. I never hurt anybody. I think I could have done much worse things. I know many people from my circumstances who did many things worse than what I did. And all in all, I'm not going to sit and pretend I'm sorry for something I'm not sorry for. And I just want to make it clear to the world that, like you said, people come from different backgrounds and people grow and people change, etc. But I also look at the world in a different way. I think that we're all constantly doing our best. I think I'm doing the best I can right now. When I'm 55, I might watch this interview and think I'm an idiot, right? And I think we're all constantly doing our best. And I did the best I could do at the time. And I don't think it makes sense for me to hate past me for doing his best. I just don't think that's a very constructive mindset.
Yeah, I think it's really important for conservatives, people that identify and say, I'm a conservative, to recognize that the people, it's not people that are perfect that are bringing people over to our side. I was not brought over to conservative principles by people preaching at me and telling me how perfect their lives were. It was actually people that were much more broken that led me here. Which is fascinating. I got interested in business because of Jay-Z. Yeah. I criticize him all the time now about things that he does. But you're not. I got interested, you know, in Kanye West, you know, him doing a Christian album and things of that nature. You need people that are flawed.
You need people that are real. This is the thing. I'm not particularly political. I didn't consider myself particularly political, but it looks like I'm kind of ending up there. And like I said, I'm a realist, which puts me on the conservative side, and I'm not stupid. And I understand very well about the world and propaganda and what they're trying to do to us. So you end up being a conservative by default. But you're a real person if you have flaws. If you want to sit and tell a disadvantaged youth growing up in the south side of Chicago how he's supposed to live his life from your perfectly manicured garden and your white picket fence, you're not going to get through to that person. They don't care what you have to say.
It actually becomes a bit of a turnoff.
Absolutely.
It's like those are things about me that I don't think will ever change, which is why I get your following. I get what people like about you. It's why you say the disenfranchised follow you. And I think it's important for people to understand that. Like, there was no way, like, and I still have no respect for her at all, but it's why I snapped so hard at, like, the Meghan McCains. I'm like, who the hell are you? What have you done in your life that you think I'm going to take advice? What, you've just been someone's daughter, right? What have you worked for?
Absolutely.
What have you survived? Tell me something that you lived through in your life that was a struggle. You can't. Because your life has been perfect. And so I think it's so foolish to think that I'm going to take a lesson, that I'm more likely to take a lesson from a Meghan McCain, who I don't even think is a conservative. I think she's just a rich girl and got rich in way worse ways than you got rich. What was daddy doing overseas?
And that's a really amazing point, because we can also look at that, right? Conservatives will sit here and attack me. There are people who are making millions from blowing children to pieces. Like, let's get the world in perspective here for a second.
But it's cleaners. They didn't get their hands dirty.
Of course.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's why I am never the first to bark when someone is suddenly assessing someone's entire life. I'm like, look at you are literally built on the backs of dead Iranian children.
Absolutely. And I'm standing up here also, and I want to make this very clear. Like, I've not tried to avoid this judicial process. I've not tried to run away from anything. I'm standing here saying, if I've committed a crime, put me in jail. And if I haven't committed a crime, what can you say I've done? You could argue it was slightly immoral, perhaps. But I also, to a degree, maybe I'm a libertarian, I think if 20 people or 30 people get in a room and they all agree to do something and it makes them happy, then they should be allowed to do it. If nobody's hurt and nobody's upset by it, then they should do it. And perhaps that does make you a libertarian. If 30 full-grown men decide to go into a room and be gay, and they want to be gay, then they should be allowed to go be gay. You're 30 men, you're not hurting anybody, it's what you want to do. If you want to wear red t-shirts, wear red t-shirts. If me and my brother had 30 people, we all got together and everyone made money and everyone was happy, who's others to come along and criticize and say people are victims, people are upset, this is wrong, this is bad, etc. So, yeah, you're completely right. It's amazing how people throw stones and how imperfect everybody is, truly. And I think the best thing you can do as a man is obviously learn your lessons from your life and try your best to pass them on. I feel like I'm doing that to the best of my ability. But also, another thing that conservatives is going to blow their minds, is going to really upset them. What they don't understand about especially the strength of my message is that to especially the young boys of the world, I'm cool. I'm cool. And I know they think that doesn't matter, but if you want to sit behind a desk and go, the Republican Bill 304, you're a dork. So no one gives a shit, right? You're a nerd. I've got the big cars and pretty women and I live the lifestyle. If you want to really capture the youth of today, you need to get some kind of affinity with them. They need to at least want to be you to a degree. You need to at least be their hero to a degree. This is where liberalism wins. I don't think a lot of conservatives understand that liberalism's sexy. You do drugs, you run around, you burn stuff. It's cool. You get a party. Because what do conservatives do? Stay home, stay home, stay home. It's boring, right? At least what they don't understand is that conservatives will sit there and go, he's a terrible role model because he has all these pretty girls in this fast car and he's a materialistic. That's the reason I can actually help the world. That's the reason young boys will listen to me. You said it yourself, 14, 15-year-old boys, they'll look at my life and go, okay, I want to listen to this guy. They don't want to listen to me if I sit behind a desk and read Republican Bill 308. I don't read that crap. I don't know. And they don't care.
I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the criticisms that I've faced was that I care too much about culture on my podcast. I'm like, culture is interesting. Culture is what is changing minds and changing hearts.
100%.
So if you don't want to compete with liberals in the cultural space, then what are we doing this for?
100%.
Right? What do you think the young kids, do you really think that they're, like you said, following a Senate bill that just hit the desk? Or do you think that how you convey that to them and how you're talking about ideas actually matters and culture matters? And it's something that conservatives gave up many years ago.
And they wonder why they lose. And then we call it...
Trump was cultural.
Trump was cultural.
Yeah.
Trump was fake news.
Yeah.
Trump was a hero. And to be a hero, you have to be attacked and you have to be an imperfect person. And that's the reality of the world. And culture is super important. And you're right in regards to conservatives giving up. I'm trying to think of conservative culture now. I mean, I like to think that we're making degeneracy unpopular. I like to think that there are some good voices out there that is making God cool again. I actually like to believe the pendulum is swinging. I do believe it. And I see it online. And it's a combination of so many small things coming together almost in perfect timing. But it is cultural. You need a cultural shift that moves away from this insanity. And you're right. If you just want to sit there and just preach, nobody's going to be interested in it. And I also think that especially in the masculine realm, I can't talk for being a woman, but I can talk for being a man. In the masculine realm, we certainly like to see people lead by absolute and utter example. Because traditionally, we would be following our commander or the man we respected into war. So we'd like to know he can at least fight. You like to see he's at least brave. You like to see him lead by example. And I think especially if conservatives want to win the culture war, then they need to lead by example. If you're going to be a conservative preacher and you want to tell men about how they should live their lives, you should be as strong as possible. You should look in shape. You should be big. You should show you're motivated, you're disciplined. You should absolutely, of course, we all have vices, but you should be very disciplined with your outlook. You should make it very clear to the outside world that what you've done wrong, what you haven't done wrong, you should take accountability. I think you need to lead by example. I don't think you can preach to men. I don't think you can preach to young boys. I think that's the reason why they don't do so well in school in general. I don't think that's the reason why they're disenfranchised. I think you need to just lead by example and let them follow. And I feel like I'm kind of doing that by just standing up and saying, no, this is who I am and I'm unapologetic for it. And this is what I've done. And this is what I intend on doing. And I'm going to try and save the world.
So I want to shift gears here and talk about your dad, because I'm quite fascinated by your dad. He passed recently.
Yeah.
How many years ago?
9 years.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
But wow, just wasn't at all what I was expecting. A chess champ, served the country. His name was Emery.
Yeah.
Really interesting to talk about just, I guess, your upbringing with him as this chess champ. How did he get into chess?
Yeah, I do believe I had the best father on the planet. A lot of the things I regurgitate are regurgitated from him. A lot of the things I say, he literally said to me line for line. I believe that he was very morbid in his approach to life, and he wanted me to understand that he will not be here forever. And he wanted me to understand that when he is gone, I had a duty to fulfill. He talked about dying a lot, which I guess is kind of unusual, but he would, even though he was relatively young. He died when he was 58. But he was a chess professional. He was a professional chess player. He was one of the best chess players in the world. And what's most interesting about him is he almost predicted the future absolutely and utterly perfectly. He was talking about the Ukraine-Russia war back in 2013, and he was talking about how the gay people can't have children, so they're going to come for your children. Trust me, that's what they're going to do. The children are next. Like, he'd say all these things back like 10 or 11 years ago, and I'd be like, all right, Dad, you're a bit crazy. Calm down. But I guess when you're a chess player, you see the future. And he raised me with absolute accountability, and he certainly raised me and Tristan to be, he understood what the world expects of men, and he raised us to be strong. And even when we were in jail, my mother would call, I'd speak to her on the phone, and she'd say, how are you doing? And I'd say, oh, don't worry. And she would say, yeah, Dad raised you for this. Like, we were always raised to be warriors. So I don't think I could have possibly ever had a better father. I'm going to miss him forever. And I think the best thing I can do is be the best version of myself to give honor and respect to him. And I think that's the best thing.
Where did he pick up chess? It's quite unusual. He's American. He was American.
Yeah.
Black American. Yeah. I don't know too many Black American chess players, full stop.
Yeah.
Where did he pick up chess?
He taught himself. And he taught himself, and he just read a couple books. I think he read 3 chess books and ended up being one of the best players in the world. And
it's incredible.
It's incredible. But it's actually interesting when you talk about, we were just discussing affinity and how people are imperfect people and how it allows you to actually teach things better. My father, towards the end of his chess career especially, made most of his money teaching chess in inner city schools because he's a big Black guy. Mm-hmm. So the children would be like, okay, I'll listen to this man. You're right. So it's amazing how affinity is real, and coming from a certain socioeconomic background is real. And, you know, we all talk about how ridiculous racism is, but also to a degree, pattern recognition is real. I look like him. I can be like him. These things are real. So yeah, he did fantastically well in terms of teaching, especially disadvantaged children. And he taught himself, and I wish I had his mind. I'm not nearly as intelligent as he was. I wish I was.
You gotta be real smart to be a good chess player.
You've got to be better than smart. I actually think you go beyond the realm of smart into I wouldn't say he was on the spectrum, but you certainly get to a new level of socio interactions. Do you understand? I'd go to chess tournaments when I was a kid, and everybody there would be a world level chess player, and everyone was a bit strange, a little bit. I don't know if it's like that anymore. I see the chess communities now moved online. There's a lot of them playing online, and they seem a lot more normal than the grandmasters I remembered. I remembered old grandmasters, half drunk, ex-KGB, shaking at the board. Yeah, like it was a bit different back then. But yeah, I wish I had his level of intellect. He was certainly the smartest person I've ever known. And even when he died, I got endless emails from people I'd never heard of who just said, I worked with your dad, and I don't think you understand how smart he was.
He served America, yeah?
He served America. He was in the Air Force, and he was a linguist for the CIA. He joined the Air Force and ended up being a linguist for the intelligence.
What other languages did he speak?
He spoke Russian, German, Spanish, and English. But officially, he was supposed to speak Russian. He assimilated Russian in 2 weeks. I think he holds the Air Force record.
Okay, so he's very smart.
Yeah, super ridiculously smart. Yeah. I got an email from somebody when he died, and they said that, I just want to send you an email. You don't know who I am. I was serving with your father in the armed forces. You tell everybody your dad was smart, and they're not going to understand how smart he was. And I want to give you a quick story. I was living with a Russian woman, and I already spoke Russian conversationally when I began the Air Force training to learn Russian. Your father knew nothing, didn't know the alphabet, didn't know nothing. And within 2.5 weeks, he was correcting everybody, including the professor on Russian.
Yeah.
So like he just read the dictionary. I saw my dad sit there and read a dictionary, just read it. And that was it. Yeah. It's like photographic memory. Like
he was on a spectrum. Yeah. Something else going on.
Yeah, something else.
Little X-Men.
Emery Tate was his name, and everyone called him E.T.
Like, he was tough on you.
E.T. He was certainly tough on me, and I can't express enough how grateful I am for that. We live in a world now where I'm going to say that my dad hit me when I made a mistake, and everyone's going to lose their minds. And they're going to pretend I was somehow abused and that somehow my childhood was terrible. And I could not if he was come down to earth today, I would shake his hand and say, thank you for absolutely everything you gave me, including discipline, including understanding that in the harsh realities of the real world, there is a line. And if you cross that line, violence appears. That's the unfortunate reality of earth. There's a line. And if you cross it, violence will appear, either from a cop or from a guy on the street, or from someone you don't like, or even a friend will turn on you, whatever. There's a line that shouldn't be crossed. And I learned that from a very young age, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm not sitting there saying a kid should be abused. There's a difference between abuse and discipline, of course. Everyone with a brain understands that. But he was extremely tough on me. And if I could change anything about my childhood, I'd only wish he was tougher. Because life's tough. Life's hard. And I think that the best thing you can possibly do as a man is prepare for the endless difficulty that's going to come your way. There's no way out as a man. You're either going to have a very difficult life to become somebody important, or you're going to suffer the difficulty of being invisible. What do you want to do? You want to be invisible and just hide and work in Starbucks and never have a girlfriend who truly loves you and nobody care if you live or die? Or do you want to go out there and be top G and be the most famous man in the world and have government agencies trying to lock you up for no reason, putting you in a dungeon? You have to make a choice. It's going to be difficult either way. So I think if you have a son and you're not preparing him for absolute difficulty, you're doing him a disservice. I think that's what has to happen as a man. And I've said this many times before, but I'm going to say it again. I don't think many people understand exactly how competitive the masculine world is. Men are constantly in competition with each other. We always have been. We used to go to war and fight and kill each other. I guess in some places we still do. Maybe that's calmed down a little bit. But in the masculine world of today, everybody is constantly competing for everything. The car that you want, other people want. The woman you want, other people want. The house you want, other people want. You're competing to have all of it. And how do you do that? You do that through status and money and influence and power. It's war. I don't think many women realize that when two men even meet each other for the first time, it's like an unspoken, maybe tiny bit at the back of the mind. There's a tiny analysis of, could I fight this man?
Yes.
That's real. It's super real. You go up and say, hello. He's more than a one-punch issue. It's it. Oh, he's one punch. He's one punch. He's 3 or 4. That's the reality of the masculine world, because we've evolved, if you believe in evolution, but my views are mixed, but we've evolved to be in this position where we're constantly analyzing possible threats, and we're constantly analyzing people who perhaps are on our team or snakes, etc. And I think that not many people understand exactly how brutally competitive the masculine world is. And I think the worst thing you can do for a son is just to raise him in a bubble. My dad, I'll say it here, people lose their minds. My dad used to just randomly push me over. I'd be like 3. You just not hard, but just get up, boy. Okay. And mom would be like, why are you doing that, son? He's like, you get pushed over. That's life. My mom hated that she did that to me. But yeah, I can give him nothing but praise. I'm really so thankful I had the upbringing I had.
Do you think he's proud of you?
I'm certain he's proud of me. And it's amazing how much strength I can get from that. It's amazing how much strength you can get from knowing that your ancestors looking down on you and you're doing your absolute best. I also believe that God can be proud of you when you do your absolute best. And I don't think many people genuinely do their best in the world anymore. When I say do your best, people sit and go, oh yeah, okay. No, when's the last time you actually did your best? Like, I don't train to run marathons, but I know if I gave my best, I could run a marathon right now, first try. If I gave my best, life depending on it. When's the last time people have genuinely given their best to anything? There are people going through the world and going through life today that don't give their best or 100% effort to anything ever. Ever. They can't remember the last time they tried. So when I'm sitting in a dungeon, I'm sitting in a Romanian jail cell, I understand that it is a chance that God has given me and my ancestors are watching for me to do my absolute best and to show to them that I am the man I say I am. You can't become the most famous man in the world for mental resilience and God not test your mental resilience. I think that would be a very amateur way to view the world, that you can now become one of the most famous men in the world who talks about mental discipline and mental resilience, and God's not going to test it. I think God's going to come along and say, okay, you want to be Mr. Famous. All right, let's see what you have. So I believed it was a chance to show God and show my ancestors and show my father that I am the man I say I am. And it's amazing how much strength you can draw from that, because I don't think many men especially understand that even if you don't have the strength to be a hero for yourself, you should have enough discipline and enough honor to want to be a hero for somebody else. And if you have other people you truly respect, you should want to be a hero for them. And I think that's the masculine imperative. If someone's going to attack your wife, that's when you become a hero for her. You have to. What kind of man are you if you're not? And you can apply that to other things. If you apply that to your ancestors, or you apply that to God, or you apply that to your beliefs or your core principles as a man, then you can be a hero anytime you want. So
it's so funny that you say that, because it really does. Everything goes back to biology. I think about this all the time. No matter how much sociology is behind everything, telling men to act like women and women to act like men. At the end of the day, women want a masculine man, and when they don't have a masculine man and they beat their man into submission, they're not attracted to them anymore. When it's a tail in between, it's just not attractive anymore. And I used to made me think of this boyfriend that I had when you were talking about, just defending the realm, this sort of responsibility that men have. And I remember sitting there realizing that I had to break up with him, because I thought that if somebody burst through the door with a gun, I was going to have to be the one that would have to defend us, because he was just such a flower.
100%.
And it's in society is yet blaring at men to do the opposite. And
they're trying to confuse us.
This is why I think you have a platform. This is my whole theory that I built in my head about why you have a platform, is because Lena Dunham came before you, right? And I think that for years, men were told to act like sissies. Yep. Men were told to put your tail between your legs. That was the message, the agreed upon message that came with, Hillary Clinton running, the Me Too movement, all of these things where men were basically told that if you have a masculine instinct, you're guilty.
Yep.
And then inevitably, because there is an equilibrium in this world, because there was Lena Dunham's, because there were the Taylor Swifts, because there was the Girl Squads, eventually what would have to happen was that it was going to have to be evened out by someone saying, no, F that, be a man.
Yeah, and I don't feel guilty for being a man, and I don't think any man should.
No, I don't think so either.
And I think that the most annoying thing about all of this is just how genuinely hypocritical it is. Because there's all this feminine movement, and we don't need men, and men don't matter, etc. That's
Music too, men ain't the whole, it's a agreed upon message that men suck.
Absolutely, and it's only in the most favorable possible circumstances where females will say that. And that's what's so disingenuous about it, because as soon as things actually begin to get hard, the closer we get to the realities of life, the closer we get to the unfortunate circumstances of the world, and they exist in many places, the faster you'll see people look for traditional masculinity to protect them. So it's not even like it's a genuine belief. That's what's so upsetting about it, is that it's just, I don't know if these people are delusional or if they're deliberately hypocritical. I'm not sure which one it is.
I think they're brainwashed. I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think it's the cultural messaging, and also in the education system, they're actively learning that this feminism is what you need to aspire towards. Like when you get out of school, women, you should want to compete with men in climbing the corporate ladder. Yeah. I actually think there's a mass brainwash that's taking place.
Oh, completely. They want to neuter men. And the way you do that is you empower women to a point where they're now the dominant power, especially in the Western world. I believe we live in a matriarchy. I don't believe it's a patriarchy like we're told it is. I actually believe it's the other way around. I can't think of a single law that benefits men over women, but I can certainly think of some that benefit women over men. Mm-hmm. I think it's very dangerous to be a man in the world today. I think that if women want to destroy a man, it's extremely easy to do. We can look at my current scenario and situation I'm in, and many other men are in the same scenario. I can't think of many examples of a man falsely accusing a woman of something and her losing her entire life, where I can certainly think of ones the other way around. So, yeah, they want to turn men into eunuchs because their intention is to make us all slaves. And I say that, and it rolls off my tongue, and people just hear it and they don't actually think about what I'm saying. Their intention is to turn men into eunuchs because they want to make us all slaves. I want you to actually understand exactly what I'm saying to you, because at the bottom line of revolution has always been young military-age males, and they don't want them to have enough balls or enough forward thinking or even enough care for anything outside of themselves to do something about it. Another thing people don't understand is that a lot of these attacks and a lot of things they're trying to do with the culture, especially, they're trying to inject such innate selfishness inside of people that they don't really care about anything that happens outside of themselves. Because then it's very difficult to give a shit about your community. It's very difficult to have any kind of genuine care about your town or your country or an issue. No, they just want you to be self-absorbed, semi-depressed, because depressed people don't fight that hard, watching porn, living inside of your own mind, convinced that somehow you're oppressed for some reason, on the internet typing tweets. That's what they want you to do. And they're going to try and keep you there. And genuine masculinity, yeah, to a degree it's protective, and to a degree also it has parameters. You can't be a man who doesn't say no. You can't be a man who doesn't have standards for himself and for people around him. I'm got labeled as ultra misogynistic because I believe that a man should have standards in his relationship. I believe a man should avoid dishonest people, male and female. You should avoid, if you're a dishonest person, if you lie, if you're going to deceive me, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I was sitting talking on a panel show saying that women who are dishonest and promiscuous are not the kind of woman I'd ever want to associate with. And I was labeled misogynistic for that. So it's crazy how they'll attack you, and they'll attack you so violently and so endlessly and repeat it so many times in a bid to beat your soul down. That's what they want, especially from me. I truly believe I'm the number one prize for them to get. If they can get me to just give up. If we can get Andrew Tate to just give up, being a man's bad. Come on, Andrew, say it. And it's like, it's dangerous, one thing, but it's actually genuinely also sad. When I analyze the situation in the world we're in today, part of me feels sad that we've ended up in this place where the people who are in charge are so evil and their plans are so heinous and the consequences so dire that they know they can only implement them if they genuinely remove the warrior spirit from every man on the planet. Yeah. It's kind of sad.
And the warrior spirit is really important. And it's something that I speak about a lot, that men need to go be men. Even in the capacity of my marriage, my husband needs his guy time. I need my girl time.
Yep.
The masculine and feminine, it's very important. The fact that my husband hunts and shoots and does these things, that's very attractive to me.
Yep.
To know that if the grocery store is faded away, that he could go catch dinner.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That he knows how to skin an animal.
Absolutely.
And they poison that. Look at the hunters. Look at the way they view hunters. They look at people in the South.
Yep.
This is why they know how to ranch. They know how to farm. They know how to survive on their own, which is why they start to poison that mentality, which is why I think it's really important that you're speaking to young men about why it is okay to be a man, giving them permission to be a man in a capacity that I can't give them that permission. In the same way that I try to give women the permission to know that don't allow them to delude you to believing that this is femininity. It is not femininity, Lena, to have your husband offer your body to another man on camera. That's the poisoning. They teach women that this is sexual freedom, that this is sexual liberation. Yeah. I looked at that and I saw a slave relationship. I saw a master offering his slave to another person because he was just so, I just love Andrew Tate. Would you like to see with my wife? I would be okay with that. That is horrific. That is not femininity. That is not masculinity.
Correct. I absolutely agree with you on that point. You're totally right there. And I think that's probably one of the most misogynistic things that have happened on the internet in recent times, but perhaps they're on the right side of the political spectrum. I don't know which side they're on, but if they're on the correct side, you seem to get away with things.